talking about music, the language of emotions. Ravi Zacharias calls it language of the soul, but we're talking about the language of emotions. If we could put music into words, we would.
I had such a great time chatting with today's guest. I'm Jason Heath. This is Contrabass Conversations, and we are talking today with Stephen P. Brown, who is the founder of Concert University, which is all about helping musicians build profitable performing careers. Much more on his website. You can get to that at the show notes for this episode, but he's great on the mic. I learned a lot chatting with him today, and I really value his perspective on music careers, building a music career, building a performing career. He's got a ton of experience, 20 years of experience with this, and has helped people across the globe. Really interesting. Before we dive in, quick shout out to our sponsors, the Bass Violin Shop, D'Addario Strings, Colstein Music, Steve Swan String Bass, Upton Bass, A440 Violin Shop, Encoda and Modacity. More on them later. And here's today's conversation with Stephen P. Brown.
How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm exhausted.
Exhausted, really? How so? You've been busy this time of year?
No, not really. It's Christmas. So I had a concert Sunday, and last night we had a holiday extravaganza. We had 248 people on stage, and halfway through I had to dress up as Santa. And so when everyone had left the auditorium, we had about 800 people there. I was the guy in the front getting my picture taken with everybody.
Okay.
So it was like 11:30 before we even finished. Oh, never mind.
Wow. Yeah. No, I hear you. It's that time of year. The last 4 days have been, let's see, San Francisco Symphony, Deck the Hall, and Holiday Gaiety, and all that kind of good stuff. So while I'm not the one up front dressing as Santa and waving the baton, I've had a lot of holiday cheer on my plate too.
And plenty of sleigh ride, no doubt.
Yeah, plenty of sleigh ride. Although it is fun playing it with a group like San Francisco Symphony, even something like sleigh ride. There's just I notice like, oh yeah, that really is mezzo forte, isn't it? And the details. I used to play. I had about 7-8 years as just like road warrior freelancing, doing every level of gigs. So it's kind of fun to get into a setup like that.
Yeah, and you often just switch off, but once you actually dive into it, it's like, oh, I actually like this piece.
Yeah, for sure. Same thing with Nutcracker. We did 2 or 3 selections from Nutcracker, and I think I've done, I don't know what the number is, but it's well into the hundreds. And so it's fun too. All those sort of bad habits that the ballet orchestra I was in had, it's like they just evaporate. I was like, oh, Trepach, it's just, I'm not annoyed at the ensemble and the low strings and all that kind of stuff. So.
That's very funny. So I know why we're chatting. Just run through the names of the bass players in the San Francisco.
Oh, the section?
Yeah.
Well, the principal bass is Scott Pingle.
Okay.
And then the assistant principal or associate principal, I always forget, assistant principal, that's the second chair, is Dan Smith. He's a younger player, absolutely phenomenal. And then Steve Tramatose is the associate principal. And then we've got Chris Gilbert, we've got Mark Wright, we've got Charles Chandler. We've got now Brian Marcus, and I'm starting to blank. I shouldn't because I know them all, but that's a chunk of them. Okay, I did okay. For 8 a.m.
All right, because when I was over here in the States the first time when I was a teenager, I was in the New Jersey Youth Symphony with a bass player who went to San Francisco.
Oh, wow!
And I'm blanking on his name as well.
Well, there's been some turnover. There were a couple players that I'm trying to now. Yeah, my brain's a little foggy on the like recent retires, but it could be someone that just stepped down too, or it could be someone who I didn't name. I'm not sure.
Oh, well, you know what? We're gonna suddenly stop and go, oh, that's him.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens.
Exactly. Are you did I see somewhere, are you in Tampa Bay? Are you in the Tampa area? Is that where you're living these days? Wow.
Yep.
Cool.
Oh, yes. By choice. We all choose our lifestyle, and there's It's a big debate that I have with a lot of people is quality of what I do in life as opposed to quality of life.
Sure. Yes.
And my wife and I learned a long time ago that we choose to go with quality of life as opposed to just what we do. So we don't actually chase the jobs. We don't go where the work is and where we feel comfortable. We go where we want to live, where we want to have a nice life. And we make the best of what we can while we're here.
I love it down there. I have such good memories of back when I was living in Chicago. There was the American String Teachers Association asked a conference. I think it was 2016 in Tampa in March, which is a really good time to get out of Chicago. and I think I maybe went to 2 sessions at that conference, and the rest I showed up in shorts and flip flops. And the rest of the time I was just wandering around that whole. They've built out that whole waterfront that
yes.
In downtown Tampa, and I went over to St. Pete, and it was just the most splendid couple of days.
It's funny when I go shopping. You can always tell when the snowbirds or the visitors are in town because there they are in their Hawaiian shirts and their shorts and stuff and flip flops, and I've got a sweater on. I've been here 8 years and I'm already spoiled and acclimatized.
You get used to things real quick. I mean, I've been in, this is year 4 or 5, I can't remember which, in San Francisco. So I live in downtown San Francisco, and I got real soft real quick in terms of the cold. Like I was just back in Chicago a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, something like that, and it was Fahrenheit 35. It wasn't even that bad. It gets way worse than that, but I was miserable and my wife was miserable, and we were just like couldn't get indoors fast enough. So yeah, but you can tell the tourists out here because they show up thinking it's California, and it is California, but it's not Southern California. So there are a lot of sweatshirts sold in San Francisco to tourists who weren't expecting like 51 and windy.
Oh, that's very true. Same with England. People say, what do you miss about England? I'm like, well, I miss the countryside and the history. Nothing else.
Well, I'm actually going over to Leeds to film a course in February, and I booked a ticket, and I thought, wow, this is surprisingly cheap to England. And I thought, oh yeah, who's going to Leeds in February? That's probably not the ideal time to experience the UK.
It's an ideal time to go for business because the expenses are low.
Yeah, and you're gonna work hard because you're gonna stay inside probably. I imagine it's similar to San Francisco, or maybe even more. It's like Seattle or Portland or something because it's fairly.
It's more like, it's more like Seattle because you get cold. The sky is very low. It's very damp. One of my friends counted 32 days without seeing the sun.
Oh man, yeah.
So I don't miss that at all. And we spent. My wife is from Jersey, so we spent 10 years in New Jersey, and I got fed up with shoveling snow up there. But that was the other extreme. It was relatively dry, but it was really hot, like 104, 105, or really cold, like 10.
Yeah.
So we don't get that in England. So I got used to that, and then we decided to live where it's 50 is cold.
And just be able to see the sun and have nature all year round. I can't tell you. I mean, San Francisco is probably in between that Portland climate and Los Angeles or something. It's generally sunny here. Like people think of it as a rainy place. It's more the majority of the time it's sunny. And just being somewhere where everything doesn't freeze and die has been so remarkable just for my outlook on life. I'm outside. I know you're into cycling, or at least I think I saw that on your website. I'm into running and walking, and I go out for this beautiful run every couple of days along the north waterfront here, and if it's the right time of the year, the pelicans are flying along with me, and it's a good way to start your day. I did not have that.
Yeah, and I just did a triathlon, and the good thing about that is the fact that I can practice on location, on site, and we're swimming out in the Gulf. So I'm not doing that right now because the water's only down to about 70 degrees.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, man.
Sorry, I'm just rubbing it in right now. And I lived in Cleveland for 2 years, and that was just like, I'm not going north again.
Yeah, I know. I hear you. I don't think we're going to anywhere snowy again. Speaking of, it's funny. Cleveland's Cleveland's an easy place for people to sort of dump on. But I've always had such a great time actually when I have been in Cleveland. Like I would not want to be living full time in Cleveland, but I've always been sort of surprised by the architecture of that town. And
Yes.
I mean, it's this. I think I certainly sort of forget its long history. It's one of the older cities in the U.S. and I don't know. It's a really interesting place to me.
So much old money there, and it's a great place to be for a weekend. And once you've done Cleveland, you're done. But to live there for 2 years, we lived right downtown Playhouse Square. I was working at Cleveland State in the music department, and it was just like, I can't wait to get out.
Wow. Yeah. Well, okay. Well, so I don't know if the way I do my podcast is we just kind of go. So I guess maybe we've started, but I can go through and edit. I can go through and edit anything. It's a very non-formal sort of setup. So, and thanks for getting in touch. I have seen I've seen you pop up on the internet in various places, and you've been on some podcasts of people that I've followed along with. So I've actually heard you chatting with folks before. Sean Perrin's a friend.
Yes.
James Newcomb is a friend, and I know you've been on there. Actually, yesterday, as I was walking to the Symphony, I was listening again to both of those podcasts. So it's sort of fun to dive in and hear what you chatted about with them.
Oh, nice. Yeah. And also, I was just with Operation Opera this week, Elisa and Rachel. So that's another podcast, which I really enjoy those conversations as well.
Opera. I'm writing this down now. Operation Opera. And then your podcast, which I just discovered too. So it's Classical Jabber, right?
Classic Jabber.
Classic Jabber. Okay. So I listened to about 2 or 3 of those too, and that's a cool. And you've been doing that. You're into the 40s, so you've been doing that for coming up on a year, something like that.
Well, yeah, sure. That particular podcast, let's say it's been a year, because we meet for breakfast and we have a chat and all that kind of stuff. And so we're episode 45 being published right now. We just did another session this week or last week. So next year it's going to change format slightly, going to focus a little bit more on career focused stuff as opposed to just ideas and things. So, but no, that particular one's been going for a year.
I like the format. It's cool. So I mean, I was assuming it was live. I didn't know how else it would work like that. But it's just you getting together with some folks and plopping down a microphone and
Absolutely, and it's really quite funny because we are there having breakfast and the servers coming into our room and they often forget that we're recording. So we edit some of that stuff out, but some of the conversations stay in. But yeah, it's literally just some friends of mine down here in Tampa Bay. We get together and we talk about classical music and life in general, which I think a lot of people forget to do. We get into our opaque bubbles and we forget to expand or realize, in fact, that there is stuff going on outside of that.
Yeah.
And that's where I like having a diverse set of people. We all are related to music somehow. We've got professionals, we've got amateurs, we've got beginners, we've got administrators. We've got all sorts of people who just somehow like music, classical music. We even had theater. There's Becca McCoy, who's up in Chicago now doing Beauty and the Beast. She was part of that for a long time. Having that extra perspective about music and what life is like with it and without it, and the people in our lives who don't have any relationship to it, that just helps, everyone get on the same page with what is it that we do and why do we do it?
Yeah, I love that idea. I love like 25 things about what you just said. So first of all, I wish more podcasts. It's really fun, sort of just being a fly on the wall at a conversation like that. And man, you're making me want to start something like that here in San Francisco because I get such value out of connecting with people outside of my bubble, and it's so easy to be in my little bass player bubble or whatever it is bubble. And one thing I do go to, and it's only once a month, is I go to Creative Mornings, which is actually happening this Friday. And I don't know if you've ever checked that out, but it's kind of like a mini TED Talk. I'm sure there's one in Tampa, and it's monthly. It's somebody in the creative arts talking about, and it's global. I think there are 180 cities that do it, but I love that because it's people, graphic designers and painters and people in various who are creatives at various tech companies here in San Francisco, of course. But I love going to that because it just makes me realize realize how narrow my music world perspective is. So frequently.
It's embarrassing sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, I've been doing this for a long time. Is wherever I travel, I just send out a few invitations, gather a few people together, and say, you know what, I'm in town. Let's meet for breakfast and talk about whatever we want to talk about. And then there was somebody who came to one of my breakfasts. I used to call them powerhouse breakfasts. Somebody came to that one and said, you know what, I absolutely love this, and I'm just taking over as the CEO of what they call Creative Pinellas. So it's like the Arts Council of Pinellas County. And she's like, you know what, I want to fund this. So I'm like, okay, fine. And that helped me expand out beyond music. That was also including dance and drama and art, visual arts as well. So that was another whole different environment. And then we realized, you know what, this is so valuable. Other people can benefit from this. Why limit it to us, just us? So when I turned it into, and I travel, and I plumped down that microphone right in the middle of the table and just, wherever it went.
Well, I love that you do it when you travel too. That's a great. I should. You give me all sorts of great ideas, Stephen. I should start. I have my recorder with me all the time. I should just get together. I love. I just as maybe an aside, but I love pulling out microphones in public. I have done that. I do that a lot. I was in Australia for a couple of weeks for a few reasons, but one of the things I was doing was interviewing bass players. I was in Sydney and Melbourne, and I love. It doesn't matter what country it is. I've done it in Italy. I've done it all over the world. There's a universal sort of like, whenever I pull microphones out of the bag, like generally the servers, and I'm usually handing people SM58s and holding them, and it doesn't matter where it is or if I'm at a coffee shop or a bar or whatever. Everybody just kind of gives us a wide berth until we do whatever it is we do.
That's so funny. Yeah, and it's taken a while to find a really good core group of people to talk about this, about whatever we want to do locally. So that's the thing that I do locally. That's what feeds my podcast, Classic Jabber. But when I travel, as I say, I try and do these just to meet people and just to connect other people. And it's so fascinating watching people who live in the same town, work in the same town, do almost the same thing, and have never heard of each other or met. And it's just like, how can that happen? But you find out really quickly how it happens.
Well, and how cool to be able to learn about the commonalities, people maybe in the arts like dance or theater, or things that are not quite as adjacent. But I'm sure there's what a great way to sort of widen that lens.
Yeah, and one of the most wonderful things, the rich detail that I get out of this is when I do invite amateur people who play in community groups, and the reason is they have another life outside of music. Mm-hmm. And there was a time in my life when I deliberately went to work for small business and then even went into corporate USA, because this is research. And it was because I wanted to find out, why is music not a part of these people's lives? In the classical world particularly, we complain about audiences getting older, which is the stupidest comment ever, by the way. Retirement age was set at 65. Why? Because they only had 5 years to live. Well, now people are living to their 100. Mm-hmm. That means naturally your average age of audience is going up. There's nothing unusual about that. And it's always been, the older folk with the expendable income and time to actually attend concerts. So I'm not really worried about those arguments, but I wanted to find out why everyday, quote, people don't have classical music in their lives. And we know it's not due to exposure. So what do their lives look like? And what are they talking about? What's the language that they use? What's important to them? So the only way I could find that out was to actually go and work for someone who owns their own business. And then after a year or two of that, I actually went into corporate USA to find out what people stuck in a cubicle 9 to 5 think and act and behave like. And that's how I've been able to help so many other people, classical musicians, shift their mindset, change their language, change their approach to almost everything that they do, so that they can actually get out there and say to people, this is valuable. You might want to try this out, because this, that, and the other thing.
Well, you'll probably relate to this story. I knew we were chatting, and I had an experience on Saturday, I think, that I thought you might connect with. So I'm playing my holiday. I think it was Deck the Hall, and then after that, there was a concert also at Davies Hall where the San Francisco Symphony plays, and it's their Soundbox series, which I'd never been to, but I went in and checked it out. And so it's talk about a different kind of performing experience. First of all, they're always sold out, and the crowd, the average age is a good 20 to 30 years younger, probably. And then everything about it is not the conventional concert setup. There are drinks. Right. You're kind of like sitting in lounging seating. There are multiple stages. There's all this. There are all these screens showing either close-ups of the performers or elements of the score or some sort of artistic thing. And then there was this one piece that, and I'm blanking on the composer's name, but it was a late 60s German piece, and there's small orchestra playing this sort of looped material, and the audience, part of the piece is the audience contributing some sort of sound which they can somehow agree on how to do it or not agree on how to do it, and the conductor in the score is prompted to encourage the audience, but the audience is instructed to maybe ignore the conductor if they feel like it, and it just it descended into the most chaotic classical music event I've ever seen. I loved it. People were hooting and hollering and shouting, and it had been raining, so people had opened up their umbrellas and were putting up and down, and then these percussionists started literally running around the audience, banging on cowbells and drums, and the conductor started chasing them, and we did the wave in the audience. And I just remember thinking, like, wow, talk about experience. Here's an experience I am not getting on a CD or for the concert I just walked out of, and into that. So,
and it's also one you're not going to forget either.
I am not going to forget that. Of course, I forgot the composer's name, but I will not forget that. I will share that story probably hundreds of times over the years.
And of course, we know that there's basically no original ideas. It's just that some people, I love what Michael Tilson Thomas does so much, but he's got the backing, he's got the funding to actually implement in a very good way what a lot of people have been doing for a long time. And events like that I've been a part of on and off throughout my entire career in England and Europe and the US. So it's fascinating to watch those sorts of things just come together in a nice formal environment that nobody has to worry about anything, and they can just actually have a good experience.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's something that classical musicians, I think, in general, completely miss the point of, because we're so focused on the craft. And this is one of my big points that I try and push out there. There is a massive difference between being a great craftsperson and being focused on your career. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You can spend 15, 20 years learning your craft, but then what?
Yeah.
Just being a good craft person doesn't mean anything anymore. That's kind of the prerequisite. So what do you do after that? And the primary thing is, it's not just about experience. It's actually about making people's lives better. And how do you do that? Because if you think about it, we all spend our money on things that make our lives better somehow.
Yeah. Yes.
We spend money on things that make our lives easier, that fuel us, have a deep impact on us, do things we can't do, don't want to do, don't know how to do. So, why would anyone pay us to perform? How do we actually make their lives easier and or better? Mm-hmm. And that's something that a lot of classical musicians really struggle to define and even identify. So that's another thing that I help people with, because when my career started so well as a young conductor, and then overnight I became too old to be a young conductor anymore. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So if I had to work, I had to do it myself, because I couldn't compete with, Marzell and Abado and Barenboim and stuff. I mean, that was just not I was just a complete no-name at that point. So I had to learn what works and what doesn't. And when I started figuring out, I came up with a little system where I can call venues, I can get a date booked, I can charge a decent amount of money for it, and then figure out what to do after the concert, which again is something else that classical musicians forget about. So I came up with this system called the Captivating Concert, and people started asking me, well, how are you doing this? How are you earning a living as a professional freelance classical musician? I mean, it just doesn't exist. So what are you doing? What's your secret? And so that's how I actually started coaching people in their careers. So now I'm still a performer. And as we said before, I choose my lifestyle, I choose where I am and what I do. And so there are times when I choose to be really, really busy with gigs, and times I'm quite happy with the 2 ensembles that I have here in Florida. It's my choice. It's up to me how much I work and how much I do. But people still want to know how they can do it themselves. And the more classical musicians, the more performers I can help make a good career out of performing freelance, then the bigger audience I have. So that when I do travel and when I do concerts locally, wherever I'm going, there's an audience there already.
Yeah.
So you could say it's self-serving, but the primary thing is for 20 years now, I've been helping performers with their performing careers.
I have been a fan of A440 Violin Shop for years and years, and I logged on recently to their website, a440violinshop.com, and whoa, totally new, redesigned. It is absolutely beautiful. You can reach out to them on the website. They've got beautiful, buttery double bass photos right up front. And whether it's a bass or a bow or some work on your instrument, repairs or restoration, A440 has you covered. I have been going to that shop since the 90s, and I've never been let down. Check out their website, a440violinshop.com, and thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast. This episode is brought to you by Encoda. By the way, that's spelled Nkoda. This app is like Netflix or Spotify for sheet music, and they are working with over 100 of the major publishers like Boozy & Hawkes, Baronwriter, and more to provide sheet music on your device. I have an iPad Pro, but this also works on Android, and I have so many pieces from Encoda loaded up on it. I have all the Beethoven symphonies and their scores. I'm circling things. I'm flipping between the score and the part to show students. I totally love this app, and people like Sir Simon Rattle are singing its praises. It really is the next thing for musicians. It's a subscription service, and you can download Encoda from your app store today for a free trial. That's Nkoda. And thanks for sponsoring the podcast. This episode is brought to you by Steve Swan String Bass. And Steve has been researching top regraduation for many years. Here's Steve on the topic.
I found some old diagrammed bass tops in an old violin making book that had violins, violas, cellos, and only 4 basses from kind of the classic period, the early 1800s. And I took a pattern of kind of a topographical map of thicker in the center under the bridge, and then, the thinnest is right near the edges, just before it flares out and gets strong again. And I put in some measurements that I thought would work, and we use that as a general pattern for top regraduation, and it really works.
You would be amazed how well this technique works. I've been impressed time and time again at how immediately a bass speaks after coming from Steve's shop, and how resonant and beautiful and open the sound is. Learn more at steveswanstringbass.com, and thanks for sponsoring the podcast, Steve. This episode is brought to you by the Bass Violin Shop, which opened in 2001 as a small double bass workshop in Greensboro, North Carolina. Today, they're staffed by 3 full-time, highly skilled bass luthiers, and they specialize in double bass sales, rentals, setup, restoration, and repair. For nearly 20 years, they have satisfied thousands of clients by offering quality instruments, knowledgeable service, reliable repairs, and superior restorations at affordable prices. They recognize that traveling and flying with the bass can be a serious obstacle. That's why they now offer several options for the jet-setting bassist. Either rent their removable neck bass for a no-hassle, convenient way to take a bass in a small package, or convert your bass to a removable neck and never be without your companion for those important performances. Purchase their Lemur Music Liberty Bell Flyaway. This package includes an airline-friendly custom travel case, and in minutes you can disassemble the bass and you're ready to go. Contact them to chat about options and find the one that best fits you. For more information and current inventory, visit their website at bassviolinshop.com, and be sure to follow them on Facebook and Instagram. I thought this would be the following topic would be interesting for us to chat about. I'll preface it with, I was just listening to a podcast for the San Francisco Chronicle here. They're going over the past 20 years of most impactful, things that have shaped our lives, not just here in San Francisco, but anywhere. And of course, they brought up the iPhone and all sorts of different things. And I was thinking, like, man, and I've been out of school about 20 years. And I was just thinking how radically my life has changed, from the little rectangle that I carry around all the time, my iPhone, to so many other things. And then, you've been doing what you've been doing 20 plus years. How with this crazy internet, always on connected world, how have you noticed changes in just like what you do? That's a horrible question, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. We get the gist. When I never set out to be a teacher or a coach. It was something, and in fact, I remember in college, Trinity College of Music, in the basement in the student lounge, there was about 5 or 6 of us, and we sat in a circle and we vowed if we ever found ourselves teaching in a classroom, we would give up music. Well, we all did, and none of us gave up music. But that was I never set out. I wanted to perform. That was clearly what I was best at. It still is what I'm best at. So I never set out to help other people with their careers. I was focused on mine. We are when we're in our 20s. But people started asking. So it was like 1, 2, 3, maybe people a year. Sometimes I kind of charged something. Sometimes I didn't. Sometimes people offered to pay me. So it was nothing particularly formal. But I was helping other people, showing them that little system that I came up with for myself. Of course, now, with the way things are going in the last couple of years, I figured out I can actually help more people. This is something that people actually want. Those who are open to it, those who are willing to shift their mindset from the old way of doing things to a completely new way of thinking about their careers. There are a lot of people out there who do that. So now, because I got bored of, and I'm being perfectly transparent and honest, I got really frustrated of repeating the basics over and over and over again. Anyone who teaches understands that when you get a beginner in, you have to do all that stuff over again. And I was getting tired of that. I wanted to get more into the advanced stuff. So I just recorded everything. And I just now deliver that basic content online. We have sessions, we have one-on-one sessions, we have Q&A sessions, all that kind of stuff. So it's like a little coaching program, which developed a couple of years ago. It's called Concert University. And the reason it's called Concert University actually is because the URL was available.
That's an okay reason. Yeah.
Right? So, that's how much my life has changed. I'm now helping people in 38 states and 4 countries on building profitable performing careers because we can deliver it online and all that kind of stuff. And we can have these conversations, these live conversations in person, in groups, individually, whatever we choose to do. That was not possible when I started helping people with their careers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the beauty to me of online learning, or having some, online learning is kind of a big term, but having that kind of fundamental, foundational content that you find yourself delivering to every student. I've had conversations with people who do a fair amount of online teaching, and you're not. It's great to be able to just take that in, delivered the way that you really think is the best way to deliver it, and then to have some one-on-one experience after they've already thought about and processed and worked on those fundamentals. You can get a little more tailored experience, so you're not rehashing the same, basic mindset and organizational skills and how to reach out to people and schedule your time kind of things. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and that's the part that I love is that individualized part, because the connections that we have with people dive into the issues that they are facing specifically in their life, in their world. Mm-hmm. Whereas before I was spending so much of my time just going over step by step what all the actions are, what the requirements are, what the mindset shifts are. And, it was just, we never got to the, okay, well, specifically for you, this is what matters. Mm-hmm. And this is how we can deal with it. Or what do you think about that? So, yeah, the online delivery portal, whatever term we want to use, has really eliminated all of that. And it now focuses my time on helping individuals with what they specifically need. And of course, because of that, I can now help many more people.
Yeah.
But the thing is, though, Jason, you've got to be very careful who you actually go to, because as I said before, most classical, I don't know what, coaches, teachers, whatever, focus on the craft. There are career coaches out there in our industry who focus on things like a one-off passion project. Mm-hmm. Which can get very expensive and no one but your mother and your cat cares about.
Right.
And then, then you're stuck in the same place. Or they focus on creating like a social media online persona. Mm-hmm. And now you're spending 90% of your time behind a computer screen instead of performing. There's another one that I came across who's teaching people new technology to create tracks and videos and all sorts of these online tools that you can sell on Spotify and on all these online. Again, why I didn't go in to learn technology. I came into this because I can create great sounds and help other people create great sounds in music. That's what I want to do. So all of those things, you've got to be very careful specifically what it is that you want, and not just get a little piece of the puzzle, but you want someone who's been out there, done what you are looking to do, and found the complete thing. There's one chap at the moment who came from outside the music industry. He had his own trade, was getting bored with it, got an opportunity to work in the pop world, and within 2 years decided it didn't work and wanted to change it all. Well, now he's helping everyone out there. And you've got to read the small print, because basically he's priming you to get on the same page so that he can be your manager.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah. You're so right. You got to be real careful with the advice you seek and the experience that people have had. And something that I think is, or the sense I've gotten kind of following with you is, and I think it's a really cool and important approach is so many people want to kind of. There's the whole music entrepreneurship kind of buzzword right now that I guess, like, I could sum it up by like, you need to be a jack of all trades. You need to do a little bit of arranging. You need to do this and that. And, you need to do that. And that's kind of been a chunk of my career. Is I've definitely been in that. And what I find refreshing and makes a lot of sense about at least what I understand about what you're doing is you're really dialing down on like what people go into music for, which is to share meaningful experiences and find a way how to do that. So, go ahead.
Well, because just to follow up on that point, I wonder why we do that. Why do we actually promote that portfolio career? I've never understood that. I composed since I was 16 years old because I had an ensemble that needed some repertoire. Mm-hmm. That's why I write music, and I never considered myself, quote, a composer until much later when someone said, "You've got 200 pieces in your catalog, dude. You're a composer." Right. Okay, fine, whatever. I still don't do that as consider it my hobby. Why not? But the going to your point is that all the big guns out there, if you think about it, people like Ford, they bought Jaguar because they like the engines. They bought Volvo because they like the safety features of Volvo. And once they absorbed this into what Ford does, they were like, you know what? This isn't what we do. This is not our clientele. The people who buy Jaguars are not people who buy Ford. People who buy Volvo are not people who buy Ford. We've got to focus on what we do well and do it really, really well. So they got rid of them. Time Warner, their entertainment. They're not technology. They got rid of AOL. Apple, when Steve Jobs came back, he got rid of everything that Apple does except one item.
Right.
That first Macintosh, that's all he just got rid of everything that Apple did except that Macintosh. And the reason is because they have to focus. So why is it that in the classical world we think we have to do the opposite and do as many things as we possibly can? Focus on that one thing. Dedicate your life to that, become an expert in that. Otherwise, you're going to become, as you said before, a jack of all trades at a lot of different things and not an expert in any of them, really. You can do them very, very well, but focus on that one thing. Now, if you have hobbies, if you have interests on the side of that, like I do with this coaching career thing, like you do with your podcast, it's absolutely awesome. And you can become experts at this, but your primary activity is still performing. That's where all of our stories build from, because that's what we want to do. That's what we focus on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's really tough to help classical musicians come to that mindset shift again.
Yeah, a friend, I believe I'm attributing this right, but Andrew Hitz, who has a great podcast called The Entrepreneurial Musician, he's talked about, sorry, Andrew, if I get this wrong, but, the two of the slowest to change, careers or fields out there, classical music and higher education. And when you weld the two together, you just got this, unholy mix of, and people listening to my podcast are probably sick. Actually, I haven't talked about this a lot recently, so they're probably not so sick of it. But if you look at a music curriculum from 1960 and 2019, there's an awful lot of similarity between those two. And if you think about anything else in this world, going back to 1960 and present day, computer science, or you pick it.
Banking, it's all different.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But that's another interesting thing, is that those are the two worlds that we're in.
Yeah, yes.
That's where, and I was just talking with somebody recently who was saying that classical musicians are funding classical music, because if you want to do anything now, you have to pay for it. Mm-hmm. And most of the places where classical music occur is in the academic environment, or within that established industry that hasn't changed since the 1900s.
Yeah. Well, that's why I love that you're doing these breakfasts, and that you are so obviously reaching out and interacting with and encouraging others to interact with people outside of that narrow scope. One thing, I don't know if you've ever been to the NAMM show, the National Association of Music Merchants. For people who don't know, it's in Anaheim, California. I don't know if you've had cause to check that show out. I would guess not.
Online.
Okay. So if you I wish that every young person, or maybe any age person involved in classical music, would have the chance to go to that show, because it will blow your mind as to what the music industry really is, and how tiny a fraction of what you're, in classical music, what we've gone to school and are training our whole lives for is. I mean, I am just astounded at that. It's over 100,000 people. It's the entire Anaheim Convention Center, all 4 floors plus the basement. It's everybody from Gibson to boutique electronic music manufacturers to D'Addario strings and you name it. People are running around in costumes, and it just makes me realize, wow, all these people are involved in just music. Forget about the whole art. This is and 0.1% of them have any interest in this little. And yet, I've been able to have this whole thriving career in this tiny little piece of the music world pie. So it's just get it, that mindset shift, I think, is just so.
And I think it's fascinating that people who maybe not in the industry, but who enjoy it and have some disposable income, spend $150 to go out for dinner, to go to a pop concert, to do all these other things. And yet they will balk at paying $40 to go to a symphony concert.
Yeah.
And I've done a lot of research. Well, not a lot, but I've done research on why people have that mindset, and it's come down to what we said before about the outcome, about what is it that you deliver, what is it, that experience, that sound exchange, that San Francisco. I used to have a thing called an after concert VIP, after concert VIP concert. I can't remember what I called it now. A VIP after concert,
okay.
which is, you have your orchestra thing and you have a great time doing that. And then you have this special event, which costs 5 times as much. You limit it to 110 people or so. And that's a very special occasion. And of course, they were just so much fun. And we did everything but serious classical music in a serious classical way. We dressed up, we even had Austin Powers turn up to one of them. It's just a fun way of presenting the same kind of repertoire. It's not even all contemporary. It's the same kind of stuff, just done differently, while people like Beethoven's concerts were 4 hours long.
Yeah.
And this whole applause between movements thing. Beethoven would do 2 movements of a new symphony. He would do a piano concerto. He'd do a song cycle and then finish with the last 2 movements of what he just wrote. So, and all the time people are wandering in and out. They're eating, drinking, laughing, talking, all this kind of stuff. And this whole applause between movements, silence thing Do you know where that came from, Jason?
I do, because I was doing some research, and you mentioned Toscanini. I wouldn't have otherwise, but Toscanini, right? Because of the radio broadcast, the length of time, right? Tell folks that's...
Yeah, so it's less than 100 years old, this purist tradition that, we've got to be silent between movements of music. And maybe in the 70s and 80s, it became a thing that composers were expecting that to happen. But until that point, it was never a thing. And Toscanini would rehearse for his radio broadcasts, and they'd get into the studio, they would do the live broadcast, and the show would always run over. And when he was insisting, it's exactly the same tempos. I've timed it. I know this is all right. And they figured out it was the applause between movements that was making the show run long. So they cut it out. He liked it. He brought it into Carnegie Hall, and boom, now we have a new tradition that apparently is sacrilege to applaud between movements. Don't get it.
Yeah, and it is sacrilege. Even places that there's an orchestra here in the Bay Area called the California Symphony, and they have encouraged their new executive director has been working, or is it their new conductor? Dang, I can't remember. Anyway, might be the conductor, has been really trying to break down that barrier. I haven't gone to see a concert yet, so I don't know how it's going, but she's certainly getting a lot of attention. I even read about it in Southwest Airlines magazine, of all things. I was reading on the plane about this Bay Area gig orchestra and all the things that they were doing. I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. So that's a tradition that has proven to be kind of hard to break, and really does add to the stuffiness, right?
Well, it does, and I like to use the example of Tchaikovsky's Sixth Symphony, the Pathtique, because at the end of that first movement, oh my goodness. I mean, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking of it right now, because it's such a powerful piece of music. Yeah. And then nothing. And I tell my audiences, and I often do talk in concerts, and I tell my audience, you know what? The only way we know if we've done a good job, if you like what we've done, is to let us know, to applaud. And cheer and whistle and do whatever you want to do. And if you've ever been to a jazz concert or a rock concert and someone has a solo, what do you do as soon as they finish the solo? You tell them that you thought it was wonderful. How do you do that? You applaud. So you know what? Feel free. And if you don't want to, then don't. Now, of course, a good conductor, and I like to consider myself in that realm, will actually be able to indicate that was a moment. Let's just enjoy this moment. Okay. And you can tell from the stage without saying anything, okay, I'm not going to applaud here because I need to stay in that moment. But most of the time, oh my goodness, you can please don't stay silent. Let us know that we've done a good job for you.
Well, that Tchaikovsky, that Pathtique, I think I'm getting this story right, but the Chicago Symphony, there's such an instinct to applaud after that first movement, and so it would always happen in Chicago, thunderous applause after that first movement, and when Barenboim was the music director, it would drive him crazy, and my former teacher in the orchestra was sharing the story with me, and again, I apologize if I'm getting it wrong, but I think I'm getting it right, but they went over to, I think, Vienna and played, and after that first movement, you could hear a pin drop, and Barenboim was just like turned to the orchestra and kind of like gave him this like, see, here's how these people know how to behave in a concert. But
he would have freaked out had he been conducting 100 years ago.
Yeah, right. And how many conventions are like the breaking up of the movements? Play a movement, do something else, get some food, blah blah blah. Play the last two movements. Later in the concert, it's a huge event.
It's fascinating, as you say. What are the changes that we've had since 1960? Well, I mean, this is a slow-moving career, as that chap said. Classical music and academia, very slow-moving. So, from the world's perspective, what's changed since 1960? Well, from classical music, what's changed since 1900? Not much at all, and we are very slow. So, it all ties in together. That maybe one day, we will be able to get out there and do our thing without these inhibitions that are preventing a lot of people from the experience, from being exposed to what we do. And I'm going to say it, and I don't get tired of saying it. We're talking about music, the language of emotions. Ravi Zacharias calls it language of the soul, but we're talking about the language of emotions. If we could put music into words, we would. And therefore we wouldn't need music. So we've become experts at speaking this language, and at the moment we're only speaking it to other people who can speak it.
Right.
And if people who could only speak French never went to Germany, where nobody spoke French, we would never have any communication with any other human beings. And it's the same with us. We've kind of lost our way in the world, I think, a little bit, and we've forgotten to actually let people in to the kind of music that we speak.
That fixed mindset, just approach to life. I think that, well, many people, that afflicts them, but I think that for whatever reason, I see that a lot in people in the classical music world, friends and colleagues, and I over the years, I thought so many times, I'm playing a gig or something and I realize like somebody out there created this opportunity for me, and I've always been inspired by people who go out and create their own concert series, create their own. And I remember I was playing. There were two orchestras I used to play in the Chicago area. One was a summer festival, multi-million-dollar budget summer festival. It was the idea of this bassoonist and flautist, and they started it up and they created it, and their audience is going, 6-8 weeks during the summer, and then they also created another orchestra that's working throughout the year, it made me realize like, wow, and everything, whether it's the Chicago Symphony or San Francisco or something, was the idea of somebody who came together or a few people. And so I don't know. I'm always inspired by people that find a way to create their own opportunities rather than just piggyback on what's already out there.
Okay, right, and I respect that, and I'm with you on that. I would then take that a step further.
Please.
And say, why is it that we're not learning from that? Why are we not piggybacking? Because if you're that creative, it's like technology. You're not getting people reinventing technology right now, the computer, the PC, all that kind of stuff. They're building on what happened before.
Yeah.
Why is it in classical music that we don't we're duplicating the same effort every time? Everyone's out there looking for something to do, something different, and we come up with this wonderful idea and they learn the hard way of how to do what they're doing, because we're not building on each other. And this goes back to our discussion about academia. I don't understand why people go to higher education, get their bachelor's and master's and their doctorates. I mean, so many DMAs call me asking for career help because they were thinking, if I get my doctorate, I'm going to be able to get work anywhere, anytime, doing what I want. Academia was never set up as vocational.
Right.
It was intended to be an exploration of to further the skills and the understanding of specific areas of human interest. That's what academia is, and at no point has anyone ever promised a return on your investment.
Right.
So taking that perspective, we then are thrust out into the world and have to earn a living. And one way we can do that, we can do the portfolio career. But you know what? I really want to do this particular piece, or I want to do this particular, I've got a great idea for this project. It's probably been done before. And yet there's no mechanism right now for people to learn from that, to duplicate it, to build on it, and do something to expand it and see what does work and what doesn't. And that's why Concert University is working so well, because that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm taking people who can do their craft and I'm showing them how to actually earn some money at it. Because why duplicate what I had to go through?
Well, and something I heard you talk about, I might have been on Sean Perrin's podcast, but the trap people fall into of working hard to do something once versus building something that you can repeat at, and I think about that a lot. Why do a whole new recital program every time you do recital if you could build something that really is effective and moving and you can take that on the road or take that to multiple occasions, and if you take all this upfront time, and you're going to take a lot of upfront time to build any sort of musical experience, but if you can then take that and play it 10, 20, 50 times more, that's where the profit and the career lies. Yeah.
Because people think, oh well, I have to charge this kind of fee because of the hours that I'm putting into learning that program. Mm-hmm. Okay, but if you now do that program, if you perform that program twice in two different venues, you've just halved the amount of time per program that you've spent learning that repertoire. If you do it 4 times, you've now quad something.
Right. Exactly.
Reduced the amount of time that you've spent to prepare for each of those programs. So if you can do it 10, 15, 20 times, you're now only spending an hour or two for each program in preparing that repertoire. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's just one of many, many cases of why. And okay, so another one is audiences. People think they're going to drown out the audience. We're going to just there's a wonderful term out there, is blanking right now, saturate. You're going to saturate the audience. And I've been working with someone recently who's really struggling with getting out of the old mindset, the old way of thinking. And she was saying how her friends and family are coming to this recital that she's setting up, and she has to spend so many hours doing it. And I'm thinking, well, why is it your friends and family that are coming? If that's your only audience, then you're going to be performing once or twice a year.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. You're going to saturate them if you're going to perform for them every month, if not every week. And that is not your audience. That's your friends and family. Completely different.
Right.
So think about it this way: if you have, if you're going to go and do a concert at a church, let's take a church for example, you're going to perform for their congregation. 50 people might turn up, so that's wonderful. It's all very nice. Down the street, 5 blocks down the street, there's another church. Do they have the same congregation?
Right. No, I would assume not.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you can take that same program and do it on the same day, for crying out loud. There's nothing stopping you doing that because it's a completely different audience. And for somebody somewhere, it's brand new. Just because it's not new for you doesn't mean diddly. Mm-hmm. It's new for somebody who's experiencing, who could become a lifetime audience member, a follower of yours. And the lifetime value of an audience member, again, is something that classical musicians don't. We turn up, we see either a sea of faces or even worse, a dark theater, and there's no connection with people.
Yeah.
If you do the recital thing and you get a small audience where you can see the whites of their eyes and you make that connection with people, they can actually become a lifetime follower of you. And therefore, that person is no longer just worth $40 or $20 or however much you're charging, they pay for that ticket. That person now becomes worth $40,000. Because over the next 10 to 15 years, the number of concerts that they're going to come to.
This episode is brought to you by the Upton Bass String Instrument Company, a company that I have been such a fan of over the years. Gary and Eric and all the good folks at Upton, they do extraordinary work. They've been at it for a long time, and it has been so much fun to watch them evolve over the years. And a question they get asked a lot is, what's the difference between their Bohemian model bass and their standard model basses? And basically what it boils down to is they come from the same basic outline, but there's much more customization available in a Bohemian bass. So Upton standard basses basically look like each other. They're either laminate, hybrid, or carved, but they're similar in their form, while you can get your Bohemian bass customized if you want hat peg tuners, if you want all sorts of other details. That's the bass you can customize. And if you haven't been to the Upton website recently, they're constantly adding new videos, new photos, new descriptions, and every bass has a story. And I love following along with these stories. Visit them at uptonbass.com, and thanks for sponsoring the podcast. One thing that D'Addario strings specialist Lyris Hung gets asked a lot is, how can you keep your strings in better playing condition? Here are her thoughts.
I get a lot of this question. People often ask me, I don't want to spend a lot of money. What can I do? And I mean, my answer is unfortunately really, really simple. And that's just to clean your strings, to keep your strings really clean. And a lot of people, moan and that, because they clean their strings. Most people will clean their strings, but not often enough.
There you go. Simple, huh? Keep that cloth handy and wipe down those strings after each use. Thanks to D'Addario for sponsoring the podcast. Holstein Music has been supplying the bass world and the music world in general at this point with great services and products for over 60 years. It was started by Samuel Colstein and has been run by Barry Colstein, who I've had on the podcast. And they are just such a great company for anything you need for basses. They've got a great selection of instruments. They've got a great selection of bows, accessories, and just a great bunch of people working behind the scenes. Barry has been a true friend to the bass community for so long, and it's so great to have Colstein supporting the podcast. Learn more about everything that they do at colstein.com. There is this mode in my practicing app, Modacity, which I totally love. It's called Deliberate Practice, and it's such a cool feature. Here's Modacity founder and CEO Mark Gelfo on how this works.
One of my pain points as a musician was like not really having a method to generate reliable improvement. And deliberate practice is like the scientific method for music practice. So what you do is you identify the one thing that you want to improve, be it articulation, intonation, emotion, comfort, whatever it is you want to improve, and brainstorm or choose one of the pre-suggested strategies for that area of improvement, and then test it out. Record yourself trying that strategy, listen back, and press yes, it worked, or no, it didn't work to create that improvement.
It's such a clean way of tracking your progress. I do it every day, and it has done wonders for my bass playing and just my overall enthusiasm for music. You got to check it out. Modacity.co is the site, and if you go to our site, you can click through it and get a special offer for lifetime access for this app. Thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast, Modacity. Yeah. It makes me think of that I don't know, you've probably heard of or read of that wonderful Kevin Kelly 1,000 True Fans article that he wrote maybe 10 plus years ago. But you know, his whole contention, and I'll make sure to link to this if I'm yabbering about it. But Kevin Kelly, his contention is that you can make a career out of 1,000 True Fans, and by a true fan would be somebody that's willing to spend $100 a year on what you do. Yes. You know, whether it's come to your concerts or buy your new album, and those are the people that metric could vary. You might have 5,000 kind of true fans, or 10,000 kind of true fans, or you might have 600 rabid fans. You know, but there's some sort of that's what we artists in this day and age should strive for. Is
absolutely
yeah.
And there's a really wonderful book. I've just finished it. It's called Superfans by Pat Flynn.
Oh, I haven't read it. I love Pat Flynn, though. I got to check that. That's new, pretty new?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, I think I got it before it went out.
Nice.
But it's phenomenal book. Exactly the same thing Kevin Kelly says, just in a more defined way of practical action steps. And the thing is that all of these little things, we can take these people's programs and whatever else, and there are a lot of people who translate what works in the business world and tries to make it work in the classical world. And it doesn't, because it's only a small part of what it is that we have to do.
Yeah.
In order to do an event, in order to do what it is that we want to do, we have to think of the whole big picture. At the moment, I don't know of many people. I don't want to say I'm the only one, but I don't know of any people out there who are looking at the bigger picture and incorporating all these little bits and pieces. Okay, which bits of the tech? Do I need a website? Sure you do, but these are the only things that you need on it. Don't do anything else. Don't waste time on this. You know?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's really easy to go down unproductive rat holes in terms of, you know, it's like you probably don't need to build out this intricate, you know, I think musicians many musicians, especially in the classical world, are probably in the dark in terms of what works and what doesn't. I'm in the dark. You know, it's funny. Audience building is such an interesting thing to me. It's something I've given such shamefully little thought about in my life. I've like sort of unintentionally built an audience with this podcast, and I have read, you know, tried to educate myself a bit and read Pat Flynn's books and, you know, other business books, but it's such a valuable thing, and you're just and I love, you know, what you were talking about a second ago is that lifetime value of that audience member, because that's so, once you get someone into your, and I do think about that now as I look at my email list, as I look at people that follow along with the podcast, as I see the reach of that, and like, oh wow, we're in a long relationship here that's going to go on for decades, you know, hopefully. And right. That's the way, going back to the San Francisco Symphony, those true fans, those true fan patrons there that have been going their whole lives, and that, you know, to talk about how amazing that concert was to their friends at work or their friends in the social circles. I mean, that's what you want to build, are people like that, and get into your world.
Absolutely. Yeah. And give them the tools to actually make it easy for them to bring someone with them.
Yeah, right. Which is it's not always that easy, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And again, Shoshana, what's that? Faniza, I can't remember her last name. Audience development specialist. It's another environment that she helps corporations, she helps the big arts organizations develop audiences, but it's just one part of the whole. And if you don't have the whole system in place, if you don't have from the beginning, like the Captivating Concert System, slight plug, I hope you don't mind.
No,
but
please.
It starts with venues. The whole relationship begins with the way you approach venues and what you say to them. Then we move on to supplemental marketing, and note the word supplemental. One of the worst things people can do is click that little boost button on Facebook.
Oh yeah.
There's a specific way to set up ads that really works, that you can track where your money's going and adjust it as you go along. If you just hit boost, you're leaving all of that up to Facebook to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, this time of year particularly, do you know how many people are advertising on Facebook? So
a few.
So supplemental marketing is the second step, and then the third step is the stunning performance, not just a good performance, but it has to be stunning. And then the fourth step, which 90% of the people I speak to don't even think about, is follow up. And it's following up with who you need to follow up with and why and for how long and what do you say, all that kind of stuff. So that is the process is very, very simple. I will reiterate, it's hard work. If you want anything to succeed, it's going to take time. And again, because people have spent 15, 20, 25 years learning their craft, they think everything else is just going to happen on the first attempt in their career.
Yeah.
And they don't apply the hard work. I mean, if you think about how much we practice and how much we study, and yet we don't do that in our career, well, how do we expect it to work?
Right.
Every overnight success that I've ever seen in my entire life has spent about 30 years getting to that overnight success.
Yeah, treating it the way that you would treat that practice time, and yeah, I'm not expecting my Bottesini concerto to be amazing day one, right? And I'm going to have to work at it, and there are going to be setbacks, and it's something I have to regularly schedule out, or I'm not going to move forward. And I don't know, maybe there's something about the classical music thing, spending so much time in a little room by yourself, polishing things to perfection, that I just makes people a little reluctant. I think that obsession with perfection is a real thing that stops, and I mean, lots of people talk about this, but I think that really does stop people from taking the steps to really build up their career. Yeah.
And if you think about it, perfection, it does hold us back, because we've only ever been performing for critics. We've been performing for our teachers, who are there to pick apart what we do, for our peers, our competition, who are always going to focus on the bad stuff, for adjudicators. We're always performing for people who are there to find the three notes we didn't play perfectly.
Yeah.
And so we've spent 15 years training our synapses in our brains to focus on that and ignore the 4,997 notes that you played really, really well. And yet that's what the audience hears. That's who's paying to be there actually hears.
Yep.
Big difference. And so it is a struggle for us.
It's a struggle. It's something I still struggle with. Every time an email gets sent out, I look at that number of unsubscribes and I think, dang it. Every time I put a video on YouTube and I see thumbs down, 2 thumbs down, I ignore the 700 thumbs up. I ignore the thousands of successful deliveries and click-throughs. I'm as guilty of it as anybody. I've gotten better over the years, because but I think that training is, at least for me, I think it runs deep.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. It sounds like you and I need to talk offline about this.
Oh, yeah. I could use some help. But so, maybe, and I'm sure that you've got plenty of great advice for this, but maybe I'll go back to that Soundbox San Francisco Symphony concert I was talking about. What an experience and what a cool thing. But we're also talking a multi-million-dollar budget thing with a whole tech crew and video, and I mean just this massively orchestrated thing from one of the top arts organizations out here on the West Coast. And then I think about people who are listening to this, so like bass players trying to figure out what the heck to do to build. They don't even maybe they're playing a couple gig orchestras and they're they're just not seeing any forward progress in their career. Like, how do you even begin? And I obviously I'm linking up to everything, and Concert University folks should check that out and follow you on YouTube and Facebook and elsewhere. But like, where do you even start if you're out there, you got your career, you're making your $48,000 a year or whatever, freelancing, same as last year. Like what do you even do to get started? It's such a tough thing.
It is really tough. And I came across a bass player at a Classical Revolution event.
Cool.
And I thought that they did a duet with a clarinet player, and I thought, you know what, that bass player doesn't need a clarinet player. Mm-hmm. And lo and behold, 20 minutes later, he did a solo. And I was just like, dude, let's talk. And I've helped him actually figure out that he can do small concerts on his own, and he can hire other people. But where do you actually start? The first place, and a lot of performers really struggle with this, is you've got to let go of the mindset. Mm-hmm. All we see in the classical world primarily is the big orchestra, the big organizations, and the big operas. So that we think that's our starting point. But as you said before, somebody came up with that idea because they started with something that wasn't that. They were in an environment that wasn't that, and they progressed to it. It didn't just happen. So we've got to let go of those expectations that have been drilled into us, that the only thing you can do is travel all over the world and pay to do auditions and work for somebody else. You can actually work for yourself. You should work for yourself. Even if you do get employed by somebody, you are still a business.
Yeah.
And that's a trendy word, to call yourself a business. And there are people out there, there are organizations and these entrepreneurial classes that are still exploring what that looks like. Well, as we said before, academia is mostly theory and exploration. It's not everyday life. So letting go of that mindset, letting go of this is what I have to do this portfolio of events. I have to go and get a job working for somebody else. I can take ownership of my own career. That's the very first step. And then once you've done that, you figure out what your outcome is. What is it that you're actually selling? Mm-hmm. Probably the most common phrase I hear with classical musicians who call me up in Concert University is, I don't know how to sell myself. And I said, good. You don't need to. That's the wrong thing to be selling. Nobody cares about you or your playing. Mm-hmm. And right there, they're like, say what? And one reason why we have that conversation is because I'm figuring out, okay, they're ready to hang up. We're done. It's not going to work. Or tell me more.
Yeah.
And it's the people that say, tell me more, that I can help. But so letting go of the expectations, coming up with the outcome of what it is that you actually are selling and what is that impact that you're making in the world? That's where we start. And from there, the rest is just fluff and budget. You can still sell the same outcome for 5 people in your living room as you can for 400 people in Soundbox.
Yeah.
It's good exactly point. The same.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's something I think about with this podcast, which although your current podcast, the social thing that you're doing at breakfast, but a lot of my podcast activities are pretty solitary. It's just me and my pad in San Francisco chatting with you here, and I sort of forget that but I've sort of figured out the how it delivers value to people and the message that it sends and how people benefit. And then I go, I was just in Australia and I'm meeting all these people who have followed with it for years and are in that true fan category. And I realize, it's this globally reaching thing. But I think I figured out the value. And even if it wasn't getting out there like that, even if it was just me doing this and I just lied and I don't really have a podcast and we're chatting, that value is still there. So, I mean, like sidetrack into podcasting. That's one of the things I love the most about this medium for me personally, is it forces me to get out there and connect with people I haven't met and do research and learn about new things, and then the art of the conversation and everything. And it's something that I personally get a lot of value out of, and that it also has this double benefit of then helping other people in their lives. It's a cool medium.
And I love it. And I love the fact that we get to chat. I think we've communicated over the years via email or something, but we get to actually meet and have this conversation that both of us have probably been thinking in the back of our minds is this would be an interesting conversation to have. And we do learn stuff. And I'm sitting here thinking right now, yeah, you've got this podcast thing down. Maybe me just sticking a microphone in the table and having breakfast with my friends, talking about life, the universe, and everything. That's a great craft thing. But how do I turn that craft of recording that podcast into a career and making it something that people do value? And helping them understand that. So you've got that down. So that's where you can help me. So.
Well, that's what I love about this. This medium is so flexible. That's what I love about it. It can be. Yeah. I've had 10-minute podcasts. I've had almost a 4-hour podcast before. It can be whatever. It can be anything. I've done best ofs with 30, 40 guests and about a specific topic that we've edited together. I've done chaotic things in bars. It's just such a fun. It's just such a fun medium, and it's something that I get a lot, and the other, and like you said, like there are people that you would love to connect with, but life is busy, and we have family obligations, and we're on the road with professional obligations, and this and that, and the podcast is a good excuse to just carve out some time and sit down and talk about something interesting. I tell people are probably sick of hearing this, but I think everybody should start a podcast. I think that it's just such a good self-improvement exercise, and I would. And actually, this might seem like a random question, but you mentioned Operation Opera off the top of your head, because I just feel like I run out of podcasts about classical music real quick. Like I can name maybe 5. Are there any others that you follow along with or that you've appeared on? We've mentioned Clarinet. I mentioned the entrepreneurial musician, and then James Newcomb has done various things over the years. Anything else that you follow along with? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Specifically classical music, there aren't many.
Yeah, there aren't many. Yeah.
No, because one of the things that I like to pride myself on is the fact that I'm doing all the research classical musicians don't need to do.
Yeah.
So I'm the guy who goes out and listens to half the business stuff with Michael Hyatt and Brian Buffini and all the John Acuff and Dave Ramsey and all these people out there who are in the business world who help a lot of people, and just pick out the bits and pieces that I can identify as, you know what, that relates exactly to how classical musicians should be operating or how they are now and shouldn't be, and all that kind of stuff. So I'm doing that research so that classical musicians don't have to.
That's beautiful. I'm so glad you're doing that, because I'm actually hesitant. Sorry to break in, but I'm hesitant sometimes to recommend the whole business podcasting world to I don't want to overwhelm my musician friends sometimes. Yeah. So I love that you're kind of filtering the most salient bits for folks. That's really cool. Yeah. And
I've always found a fascination with that ever since I was in college, and I started doing that was because of the nature of what I did. I went to college when I was 17, did my percussion performance degree in 18 months. So I was just turned 18 years old when all my peers were just in their first couple of semesters. At that point, I became England's first undergraduate conducting major. Because who the heck is going to listen to an 18-year-old conductor in college? That's not going to happen. So I had to do another undergraduate degree. It didn't exist. So Philip Jones of the Philip Jones Brass Ensemble, he was the principal at the time. He and I made up the course as we went along, and I spent as much time at the Academy and the Royal College and the Guildhall as I did at Trinity.
Wow.
So my whole life was growing up picking bits and pieces, the best bits of what is out there, and bringing it into the world that I want to operate in. But I just want to make one little observation about what you said before about why you're doing this podcast, Jason, because this is awesome. Everything that you mentioned about why you're doing this was not about money.
Yeah, right.
And yet probably 60 to 70% of the people that I speak to in classical music that's all it is. All it is for them is about the money. And that is not going to happen. If your focus is on building an income, yes, I tell people I can help you build a decent income. Some of my students and myself, we earn well into 6 figures from freelance gigging, basically, in the classical world. But that's not the driver. The driver is that outcome. It's what you get out of it. It's what you can give the audience so they get out of it as well. So I just wanted to make that observation that it was interesting you didn't go down that money road. And that's one of the many reasons why your podcast is so successful, because you're not focused on that part of it.
Well, for me, thank you. And then for me, chasing those obsessions, those things that you wake up first thing in the morning thinking about. And it's true on bass too. Like, I've never chased the money. probably wouldn't have gone into music if I was doing that. But even within the world of music, yeah, it's finding those things that fascinate you.
It is.
Yeah.
Now there's a difference between that, chasing the money, and what a lot of people think of as being materialistic.
Sure. Yeah.
You are a human being. We are all human beings. Whatever we do in life is supposed to support us living a life of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have an idea of what that life looks like, then what are you supporting? Where are you going? What are you trying to do? And at the moment, probably the easiest thing that we can do to picture, to conjure up, to vision this dream lifestyle of ours is to think of the kind of house that we want, the kind of car we want to drive, the kind of places we want to travel to. That's not being materialistic. That's living life as a human being.
Yeah.
Very different to I want to earn, $1,000 per gig.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of why. So I can buy nice things. So I can buy this, I can buy that, and I can feel good about myself. That's kind of edging on materialistic. Whereas having a vision of the dream lifestyle you want to live, as we said before, my wife and I choose to live where we choose to live. We can all choose where we want to live. It doesn't matter to me as much about what I'm doing here. I can make it work somehow.
Oh, for sure. I think a lot of people don't dream big enough too. I am so guilty of I am like horribly guilty of not dreaming big enough. It's funny. I was actually chatting with Angela Beeching, who you may know, wrote a great book, Beyond Talent. And I probably brought it up, but if I go back 4 or 5 years and I created the dream lifestyle for me, I'm doing what I was at this point here in 2019. I'm basically doing what my most the most insane vision of what I thought the future would be is right now, which makes me think, oh, maybe I should be if it was that easy to achieve, probably I should dream a little bigger than that. So
and I'm just looking at it. There it is, right there on my bookshelf, Beyond Talent.
Hey, nice.
So the thing is that if that dream existed 20 years ago, what were we saying before about the classical music field? It doesn't move.
Yeah.
20 years later, you're achieving that dream lifestyle. How come that vision hasn't changed?
Yeah. Yeah.
So get to it.
Uh-oh, I got work ahead of me. Well, Stephen, this is so much. This is a lot of fun. The door is always open, my friend. I have had people on 5, 6, 7 times on the podcast. I just think of it as like a talk show that So anytime you want to hop on and talk about anything, or certainly if you got a new project coming out, and obviously Concert University, I'll link up to your website and social media and everything. Yeah. Anything else you want to dig into or let folks know about, or anything?
Well,
yeah.
Just the fact that this was a roundabout chat, and we've covered a great deal of material. I do have specific topics and ideas that I do speak about when people ask me to their events and to their locations, whatever else, like speaking topic kind of things. Maybe we could do that in the future. But right now, you know what? There's a lot that we've discussed that people have got to get their heads around. Maybe just listen to this particular episode over and over again, just 2 or 3 times, because I can put my hand on my heart and say to you, you're going to hear something that you didn't hear the first time.
Yeah, I agree. And I love going back and listening multiple times on podcasts. I don't always do it just because I listen to a lot of things. But yeah, you really do learn a lot, don't you, going through a couple passes. So
yeah, and take some notes as well. And keep all the notes. Each pass that you listen to it, keep the notes on the same page.
Thank you, Stephen. Great to chat with you. And folks, you can learn more at stephenpbrown.com. That's linked up in the show notes. And yeah, hopefully this is the first of many conversations. I love having people back multiple times, and I love chatting with people outside of the bass world. As you've probably noticed, if you follow along with this podcast, it is, of course, 85% bass players, let's say, at least. But I think we've got a lot to learn from people. This is not a radical statement, but I think we've got a lot of things to learn from people outside of our bubble, as Stephen used the term, our instrument. And yeah, more to come from folks like Stephen, Angela Beeching, some of the other guests we've had recently, and of course, many more bass players, including many from Australia. I had such a great time in Australia. I've just been going since I got back, so I haven't had a chance to even sit down and get the episodes out to people in the pipeline, but that is my goal. Actually, by the time you're hearing it will be in the pipeline. So expect many, many great conversations with people like Steve Reeves, the former principal bass of the Melbourne Symphony. He just retired. Kees Boersma, the principal bass of the Sydney Symphony, and so many other people. You're going to dig it. It's going to be great. Contrabass Conversations is produced by Michael Cooper, Steve Hinchy, Trevor Jones, and Mitch Mooring. And Mitch is making beautiful basses in the Dallas area. Learn more at mitchmooring.com. Thank you to Krista Copper for cataloging and archiving everything that we talk about here on the podcast going back over a decade. Super helpful for all sorts of projects moving forward. I'm your host, Jason Heath, and we will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.